I'd like to introduce another Carey School alumni, Everett Perry, and his Panther Points of Pride video.
Hi, I'm Everett Perry, and I graduated from Carey High School in 1958. I lived at a house, a little greenhouse on Castle Corner, and that house is still there, even though Castle has built a gas station there. The biggest memories were football, basketball, and track. I had one event where we played Bellevue High School for the conference championship, and it was tied at the end of the regulation play, and I got fouled 7 times in overtime and made all 7 of the baskets, and they carried me out on their shoulders. Joe Dilworth did, and Doug Park and Dar Park, and carried me out on their shoulders. Actually, the principal was Mr. Can't think of his name right now, but he was one of the best ones. Well, Ronald Peck was one of my favorite teachers too, as I recall now, because he taught the band, and I challenged a couple of guys for first seat in the trumpet section, and got promoted to be first chair. Bob Day was wonderful. He was just an excellent teacher.
And what did Bob Day teach?
Biology.
Or was he the principal?
No, he taught biology.
Oh, okay.
Bob Shea was the coach.
Shea,
Yep. Well, mostly LeGrand Dilworth and Joe Dilworth and Doug and Dar Park and Camille Rhodes, my girlfriend at that time. Well, there was 10 girls and 5 boys. And the 5 boys were Lynn Adamson, myself, LeGrand Dilworth, Bob Whitby.
Oh, okay.
And they were my favorite people. Played football, basketball, and track. That was my fun. And that part of the time I did another farmer's chores, just to keep myself in Carey, because my father had moved when I was a senior, my senior year, and I didn't want to go. So I stayed and did Paul Olson's chores while Paul went to Rick's. I had no idea what I wanted to be after high school. And I was facing a lifetime of farm labor, and that's when I went in the Navy. And then after the Navy, I realized I needed to be in a health-related profession. So I majored in public health, and then worked in Utah for 18 months, and then also got a full ride scholarship to go to University of North Carolina and get a master's degree in public health. So I got a Master of Science because my classes were mostly all science classes. Well, I went 4 years in the Navy and was a sonarman. We pinged on Russian submarines and whales when we could focus the beam, the sound beam, on whatever target we were looking at, and we could make the whales really angry. They would go, woo, woo. That was a sonar buoy that they put in the water, but we didn't do that. We stayed pretty well in the sonar room and worked on pinging on submarines, Russian submarine. USS Somers, DD-947, was brand new when I went aboard. Brand new in 1959 when I went aboard it. That was after sonar school. But right after I went aboard, they informed me that in 1 month they were headed to Australia, and that's where I went. Well, we went to Hawaii, then we went to Fiji, and then went across to Hobart, Adelaide, Melbourne, and Brisbane in Australia, and then up to Singapore, and then Bangkok, Saigon, Hong Kong, and Philippines and Japan, and Taiwan. Got to go to both ends of Taiwan. Well, the Navy certainly saved me because I was facing a lifetime of farm labor, and I knew that wasn't what I wanted to be doing. I worked for Buzz Stocking, So the minute I got out of the Navy, I had saved enough money for 2 years of college. And so I went the first 2 years of college, and then the second two on student loans. And then worked in Utah for 18 months, and then realized that I could probably get a scholarship to go to University of North Carolina in graduate school. So then after graduate school, I became an epidemiologist with the Public Health Department in Twin Falls and in Boise. And I ran health clinics, public VD clinics. And then after that, I started the EMS program in Idaho, the Emergency Medical Services, and trained ambulance crewmen and upgraded ambulance services. Instead of being picked up by a hearse on the highway, we were able to get picked up by a real ambulance. I didn't really retire from public health, but I decided I really needed a little bit more money than public health paid, and so that's when I went into pharmaceutical sales. And when they hired me, I told them I really want a metropolitan area with a medical school and all that. And my territory at that time in pharmaceutical sales went from Ashton, Idaho to Baker and LeGrand, Oregon. So I was on the road almost every week. And so that's when I decided I needed to go into pharmaceutical sales. So I answered an ad in the Seattle, or in the Times News, to go to work for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. And that's what I did. Well, I knew all the doctors anyway from public health, from working in the health department. And so it certainly did help to go out and visit with them and find out what they needed to have investigated. So as an epidemiologist, I was a disease investigator. So, and that was probably one of the funnest jobs I had. I retired from pharmaceutical sales for one reason, and that was because I wanted to write my uncle's story from World War II. My uncle died in the Osaka prisoner of war camp in 1943 when I was only a 3-year-old, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So the day after I retired, I was in my Chevy Astrovan headed to the National Archives from Seattle, and I spent 3 weeks in the National Archives, and after 2 weeks, 2 weeks and 6 days and 6.5 days, I was ready to get out of there. I was like toast. And I went to the archivist and I said, bring me everything you have on Osaka prisoner of war camp. He says, Mr. Perry, there's 29 camps in Osaka. You'll have to go through all 29 library carts full of papers to find your uncle. So I said, okay, bring me one. And at least I'll know what I'm up against when I come back. And so they brought out Yodogawa steel mills. I threw my uncle's picture up on the desk next to me, on the corner of my desk, and I said, I need your help, buddy. And lo and behold, I turned 2 pages, and there he was. What he died of, when he died, his whole history being at Yodogawa steel mills. That's where the prisoners of war shoveled coal and cleaned blast furnaces, because the Japanese men were all out fighting the war. I wrote the book, put it on the internet, and so far I've sold 400 copies. That's $8,000. If I had gone through a publisher, I'd probably had to sell about 1 million copies in order to make that much money. So that's what I did. I wrote another one when I was on the way to the National Archives from Seattle. I stopped in where my great-grandfather enlisted in the Civil War. He served in the 11th Regiment Michigan Volunteer Infantry, and I chased his battle sites all the way down to the trenches in front of Atlanta where they got discharged. And then I headed on to the National Archives. So those 2 books that And I also wrote one on my ship, the USS Somers. I pulled out the drawer in the National Archives, the photo drawer, and there were 7 ships named USS Somers, starting in the War of 1812, all named after the same hero. And so I wrote a book called The Somers 7, and I sold 100 of those at my ship reunions. Yeah, I just kept on writing, and now I'm up to 13 books that I've published, self-published, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been just a real labor of love. Well, no, but I did feel that the next step had to be the Navy, and that set me up to do my Navy books and to also join the Navy. That's how I got there. Well, I would recommend that they work very, very hard and keep a good GPA, but if they don't, then the military service is obviously an advantage, and that certainly was my advantage. It gave me time to get my act together over a 4 years period of time. Over that 4 years, I advanced to be the highest I could be in 4 years. And that was a Sonderman second class. But I certainly would recommend if you don't have a good idea of what you want to do, try the Navy, because you will learn a whole lot. It was probably the greatest adventure of my life. Still, my Navy service. It certainly was just a joyful blessing. And North Carolina too, getting to go there to University of North Carolina and not have to pay a solitary dime. They paid housing and everything. So where I got my master's degree. I'm Everett Perry, and I graduated from Carey High School in 1958.